So welcome to the program today. Learning Unboxed is on the road of sorts in the middle of a global pandemic, but today we are headed to Ireland to talk about innovations in education there. And joining us, we have three wonderful guests that are going to talk about the great work that's happening. First and foremost, we have joining us Alice Darcy, who is a STEAM, who has been involved with STEAM Education Limited since it was founded in 2014, and she currently manages the company and is fully involved in the development, delivery, and training in relation to all of the STEAM programs there. So Alice, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. We're delighted to be here.
Wonderful. And joining Alice is Elaine Higgins, who is a materials engineering manager with DePuy Synthes, and is part of the JJ family of companies, which I'm sure she will explain all of that, make sure that we got everything all sorted out. And she leads a technical virtual team and is involved in lots of engineering and 3D printing. So Elaine, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
And I'm joining as well is Mark King. Mark is an educator of 19 years experience working with children. And right now he is with the O'Connell Primary School in Dublin. So Mark, welcome to the program as well.
Hi, thanks for having me.
We are thrilled to have all of you. And so, hopefully one of the things that's obvious is, these three folks somehow are doing something amazing together, which brought them to the program. So Alice, let's start with you. Give us the 30,000 sort of foot view overview of sort of what exactly STEAM Education Limited does and how I suspect that synergy brought the three of you together.
Okay, thanks, Annalise. We were founded in 2014 because we noticed that there was a gap in STEAM education in Ireland, so science, technology, engineering, arts and maths. So it stemmed from a multidisciplinary group of people seeing these gaps and trying to find a better way to fill them while facilitating enhanced STEAM education in Ireland, but also supporting the teachers involved in the primary school sector and working with industry and academia. So really boosting the expertise that's already there in the country to help the primary school teachers to help the children. So Elaine and DePuy Synthes were one of our first companies that joined the STEAM community, and Mark King's school is supported by the Naughton Foundation, which is a foundation that supports a lot of our companies and has been involved since the very beginning. So that's how we ended up working together. We've been working together for several years now with primary school children ages from about 10 to 12 years old. And I think it's been going really well. So we're really delighted that everyone is still involved.
That's wonderful. Wonderful story. So Mark, let's balance that out a little bit. So give our listeners who come from all over the world, may not be very familiar with the sort of educational system in Ireland. So as the school representative sort of in this mix officially here today. So help us understand sort of there was a need here for a reason. So I guess that's the big question is, so what was the rationale or the reason for something that was missing or, needed to be amplified, maybe is a better way to put it, in the Ireland education system that made this project and this collaboration meaningful and necessary?
Well, I suppose the ideology behind STEAM education lends itself to primary school in that it engages the kids very, very quickly. Like I would have a scientific background, but a lot of teachers wouldn't have scientific backgrounds and they might be a little bit apprehensive about teaching science. And I think the STEAM education philosophy lends itself to teachers developing professionally themselves. But what it also does is it completely engages the children. The layout of the lessons and the way the lessons are taught by the guest scientists or engineers that come into the classroom, it completely engages the children. It's completely inclusive. So children from every different level, academically, linguistically, they can all engage the lessons on their own level. and learn basically the different aspects of the lessons quite easily.
Yeah, that hands-on, very applied STEAM and STEM education that we see in lots of places around the world. Universally, that's what I will have, teachers and community members tell me, right, is that it's so engaging, and it's accessible, right? And those are all the wonderful things that we collectively and collaboratively love about this type of teaching and learning. So thank you very much for that. Same sort of toss question, Elaine, back to you, because, oftentimes when I have conversations about these really, really successful, innovative, collaborative programs that are doing these great things at schools, what you will find when you dig just a little tiny bit is there's a very meaningful industry partnership or component in the middle of all of this that, quite frankly, is critically important to the success of the program. So talk to us a little bit about your company's, not just their involvement, but more importantly, the rationale for why do this thing? Why invest in the time and the energy from an industry perspective?
I think it's twofold. One is for the kids and the children, and bringing STEAM and STEM subjects into the fore and into the classroom. Another one, which sometimes doesn't get articulated, is around the development of our own engineers and scientists. So it gives them an opportunity to go out and practice their presentation skills in a sometimes hostile environment, being keeping control and teaching to maybe up to 25, 30 11-year-olds is a good training arena for upping your presentation skills. But that's just one side of it. And I think the biggest thing is about bringing STEAM and STEM education into the classroom and supporting our educators. For me, it's around creating that talent pipeline. It's all about getting people interested, showing that you don't have to just be one way to get into science and engineering. It's so important to broaden children's view of what our jobs are and what our industry is, and the wide range of roles and opportunities that you have, and seeing that adage of you can't be what you can't see, I think is very important, which is why, me in particular, I wanted to do the teaching. I coordinated it, but I also did the teaching myself because I wanted to experience it, but I also wanted to give back because it was something that wasn't really there when I was young. And
right.
I think it's very important to give back. And I think from a business point of view, really it comes down to that talent pipeline, because the bigger the pipeline is, the more success we have and the more diversity we bring into our industry.
Oh, absolutely. I hear that repeatedly, right? It's all about workforce development. At the end of the day, right, there's a very self-interest from the industry standpoint, is, back to your point, expanding the pipeline, making sure that we've got, people moving through. And quite frankly, from the educational standpoint, what we know is not only can you not be what you can't see, you can't do what you don't know, right? And so you have to have exposure to the potential, to the opportunity and the rate and pace of technological shift that's happening in the world today. We're talking about imagining, or helping kids imagine, the potential of careers that haven't even been invented yet with our youngest kiddos. So Alice, I want to sort of bring this back around and help our listeners, have a sense of, give us an example. So you've formed this amazing partnership, I assume, with multiple schools and industry partners along the way, but give us a sense, our listeners, what exactly is this partnership doing? Give us something really tangible to think about here.
Okay, well, there's about 3,000 primary schools in the Republic of Ireland. As Mark mentioned there, not a lot of teachers would have had science training or STEM technology, or certainly not engineering. The maths, I would say, is kind of limited. So what we're doing is really bringing the expertise of academia, cutting edge research and industry down to a really digestible and accessible set of lessons that also match elements of the primary school curriculum. So in both of the schools, so the school that Elaine worked with and in Mark's school, We'd have a look at what are teachers supposed to be teaching in terms of science in a year. Do they have the resources to do it? No, is usually the answer. Do they have the professional support to do it? Again, no is usually the answer. The schools are not fully supported financially. I'm sure it's the same around the world. They also don't really get a lot of STEM training in initial primary education, so before they become teachers. So there's that gap. And then we're expecting them to deliver science curricula that they are not entirely sure of themselves. So one element of it is removing the fear factor. So in our trainings, well, in a normal year without COVID, we would do our trainings in person, and we might have 20 companies with 20 scientists or engineers matched with 20 primary school teachers. Everybody meets, and a little bit of that is kind of a deconstruction process, really. So the teachers are sometimes afraid that they're kind of going to be exposed as not understanding science. Scientists and engineers know their science and engineering, but might be exposed in terms of being able to manage classrooms or to facilitate and deliver lessons without loads of scientific jargon, or in a manner that really relates to the lives of the children and enables them to connect that to potential pathways for careers. So we've seen really nice examples, and as Mark said as well, in like different levels of academic ability, different levels of support required. All of our programs start from the point of give it a go. Like the first step is to give everything a go. Try everything. It doesn't matter what your background is. We're all going to work together. We're going to participate as equals. So we have lovely working relationships then. All our programs are designed for teamwork, which we had to adjust slightly, of course, this year. But it's really important to bring in those diverse skill sets and allow children to see that you don't have to be like a super smart, typical what's seen as a super intelligent person to be a scientist or an engineer. There's a lot more skills involved. So there's creativity, thinking. These are skills that don't just apply to science and engineering. These apply to real life, lifelong learning competencies. So really, we're just trying to make that tangible.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we've had really great feedback. So feedback from the teacher side is usually, I'm not in any way as afraid of teaching science as I was, or engineering as I was at the beginning, because I've seen how somebody who knows their science and engineering does it, and it's not that scary. And then from the other side, we often hear people saying, oh, I wish we had that when I was in school. So like Elaine might have said that. And then people are really delighted. And they also say things like, it actually made me remember why I became a scientist or an engineer in the first place. We connect back with the fundamental basis of why these subjects are important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would also hope that from the teacher experience, you get comments, about, oh, now I remember why I went into teaching, right? Because that's one of the other things, and so Mark, I want you to share with us a little bit about what it feels like on the ground. So when this program comes to your classroom, right? What is that experience? Because one of the things that I hear from teachers repeatedly, especially as they're suffering from standardized curriculum and standard fatigue. Not that those programs are in any way bad. Their intent is often very good, but they normalize almost to the detriment of the individual student's curiosity and ability to learn. Maybe I'll phrase it that way. So politically correct. So Mark, tell us what that experience is like actually at the classroom level when you're delivering this program, and maybe even give our listeners just a bit of an example of what the program might contain.
I think the program, to start with, basically, if you mention a scientist or an engineer to children, it's nearly magical for the children. Or there's a scientist coming into the classroom, or there's an engineer coming into the classroom. They're nearly expecting somebody to walk in with a white lab coat on and glasses and grey hair, because that's, the generic vision of what a scientist would be. So straight away, it arouses their interest.
Mhm.
We have a scientist coming into the classroom. So first of all, they're at ease basically when the scientist comes in. And as a teacher, then you can work in harmony with the scientist who has the expertise. And then you obviously have your expertise in how to deal with classroom situations and how to deal with groups. So it links in so well. So from a start point, the two, the engineer, the scientist, and the teacher, they blend together straight away. The interest of the children is piqued straight away. And then obviously the delivery of the lessons through the activities that STEAM education sets out would be fun, engaging, hands-on, group work, social learning. And the kids are learning as they go through the lesson, but they don't even realize that they're learning, you know what I mean? Because they're having so much fun. So it is a break from the norm for a teacher. Obviously, we have to meet targets of curriculum. Alice mentioned the curriculum there. So you've got curriculum, learning objectives and strands that you have to cover. And the STEAM lessons, what they do is they meet those, they meet the learning objectives,
Right.
but in a fun way. It's just a completely different way of delivering science, technology, arts, English, maths, education, so that the children will engage with it. And also, and remember it as well, as a teacher, you're learning your own subject matter. You know, you're developing professionally because you're listening to an expert in their field. Okay, so you're taking that from it as well. So your knowledge is increasing, your understanding is increasing, and the children obviously are probably seeing the teacher in a different light as well. You know what I mean? Because it's fun and it's not, here's a book, answer these 5 questions on this. It's completely fun based, and that is the key for me as to why it's so successful, because the children are learning in a fun environment all of the time.
Yeah, we hear that. Absolutely. I can tell you that the echo, you know, people who are listening right now, they're cheering you, Mark, because you know, that's exactly what, you know, when we talk with people involved in these types of very applied, very deliberate, hands-on programs, that, and you know, at the core of them is to hook those kiddos, right? To tap into their amazing creativity and imaginations and say, you know, not only is this a fun thing to do, but it could be an entire career, and let's all learn together. And so I appreciate that very much. And I especially, Mark, appreciated your comment about the fact that the kids get to see their teacher in a new light, because that cannot underscore enough how critically important it is for kids, especially kids who are hesitant learners, which there are a fair number of those, right? To cozy up to an adult that they admire and trust, to learn together, not just to be delivered content, but for the teacher to be brave enough to say, I have no idea what Elaine, the engineer, does, but she's going to come in here and we're going to build a bridge together, right? That's incredibly, incredibly powerful. So thank you very much for sharing that, Mark. So Elaine, I saw you shaking your head, you know, profusely as Mark's talking about all the engagement that's going on that happens in the classroom. And you know, as an industry person, as an engineer coming in and being one of these visiting scientists, partnering up with a teacher in the classroom, share with us a little bit about what that feels like for you from the industry side, because you're not a teacher. Back to Mark's point, you know, there's a whole set of skills that he as a teacher has, you know, and whether the teacher is comfortable with that scientific knowledge or not, you know, their role in there is to at least be able to have the pedagogical sort of influence and understanding in that moment. So Elaine, talk to us a little bit about coming into that environment and how you, as a research scientist, navigate becoming a partner with a classroom teacher, not just science day, you know, because that's the other thing that often will happen. I'll talk to schools all the time. Oh yeah, we've got visiting scientists. They come in all the time. You know, that's very show and tell. That's not deliberate. What's the difference here?
It's because it's structured, and you know, the kids know that you're going to be there for 6 weeks, and
6 weeks.
it's nearly our company chose to have it, and one engineer will take the first cohort and the second engineer will take the second cohort. And one, it meant that the kids, the same class, were seeing different people and getting a different style, but also we would then get more people to get the experience. So it's a two-way of experience. But really back to that initial question, there's a bit of structure. There's structure in the lessons, but there's also structure with knowing that you're going to be there at the same time each week.
Right.
Which
right.
even just as an engineer, that goes like tick box in the head. I know where I'm going to be, and you can anchor yourself. And the teacher, the experience that I had, the teacher was so welcoming of me into the class and so welcoming of my style, that I respected their competencies, and that I wasn't to go in and cause mayhem, which may have happened by accident, which goes back to the fun side of things. But it was really just that mutual respect, I think, and I really embraced it. I really lent into it. I didn't, teaching was not on my personal horizon. So it was really a personal opportunity for me to lean into, oh my God, what's it like to be a teacher? And to really spark that imagination in children. And even if they weren't going to be scientists at the end of it, to spark them of like, this is interesting. And it's not just, oh, science. Like it can be fun. And even if it's not your thing or your jam for the rest of your life, to have an appreciation of when these people are on the news, as scientists are all over the news at the moment with what's going on in our world, to have the respect of what it took to get there and the peak of interest, and that it can be fun as well. And while they're being maybe a little bit serious, that there is a lot of fun in the journey behind it. And but most of all, it's really about that mutual respect and just embracing it and leaning in and enjoying it, because there's nothing like hearing laughter and smiles of children. So if you lean into it, you'll get a lot back. You'll get a lot more back than you put in. That's what my own experience was.
I love that so much. Thank you. That's so refreshing. Thank you for that, because you're so absolutely correct. There is nothing quite like the joy of being completely immersed in kids learning and the light bulbs going off, metaphorically and otherwise, in the midst of that classroom. So Alice, I want to talk a little bit about how the program, the actual units that the scientists and the teachers deliver, how is this content created? Because I can guarantee you, because I get the emails after the programs often from folks, that's one of the questions that everybody always wants to know. So how is the content that's going to be delivered actually created? What's that process look like? And I can tell you, just sort of hedge our bets here, the reason folks ask this is, at least in the US and some other parts of the world, unfortunately, oftentimes content gets created without educator input, especially content that's coming out from really, really large government-run scientific entities. And I'll just be vague like that oftentimes those research scientists who are just epically amazing in their own fields, but they don't really have a very good sense about how to take the amazing science they're doing and making it accessible to that third grader, right? Or to that fifth grader, or to that high school student, or even, quite frankly, in many cases, post-secondary as well. So that's the reason we get this question. How is this created, Alice?
Okay, well, I think there's two aspects to it. One is probably partly from my own personal background. So I was a scientist, so I've a BSc, MSc, PhD, but in the ecology and environmental sciences. So my understanding of science is based a lot on being outdoors in nature, physical, hands-on. So it's a different projection, I guess, than a lot of people would have of science in the first place. So, I have friends who work with sharks and, giant tortoises and, people who work all over the world, odd hours of the day and night, as well as doing lab-based work. But at the same time, I was a real mixed bag. So I was working in the arts. I was doing stop motion animation classes with children. So I worked, I ran my own classes with children as I went along. So I had the kind of a mixed experience, which came together in how we develop these programs. So that's one aspect. The other is feedback. So the first 2 entire years, I think, largely supported by the Nocton Foundation, where we actually ran a 25-week program for the first 2 years. So we really covered the entirety of the primary school science curriculum in a way that we thought would improve the capacity of the teachers to deliver it with the children. But every single year, every program that we run, we look for feedback. So we get a lot of feedback. In recent years, we get less actually, and it's less because I think we've practiced.
Yeah.
We know what works now. We know what works well. So the feedback we tend to get back now is usually just positive.
Mm-hmm.
So I nearly have to drag information out of people to tweak it at this point. Whereas in the beginning, we would have had focus groups. We would have had the scientists involved, the teachers involved, all come back and, you know, just tell it like it is, like what worked, what didn't work. Does the timing work? Is the pitch level right? One thing we're doing at the moment is we have a primary school teacher on staff now, so we're actually kind of going back through our programs and recalibrating them again to the level that our Sinead, our staff teacher, thinks is more relevant to the children. So it's a constant state of improvement, but we would literally get like hundreds, if not thousands, of pieces of feedback every year that we then go back, look at our programs and think, okay, is it working? Is it not? How can we make this better? So it's really persistence, I guess, and constant small changes. So much like the scientific process, we just iterate. How do we make it better? And then another part of it is that I would usually visit, not this year, obviously, but usually I would visit at least 5 or 6 schools at the end of their programs and talk to the children directly. So, or even hang around the staff room for a little while. You know, so sometimes people don't answer questions when they're asked directly, and you kind of have to give them the space and ask the questions in a way that allow them to answer without fear of being wrong or that the person you're talking to won't like the answer. So we're very conscious of that it really works for schools. And we've also obviously visited hundreds of companies in Ireland and worked with, we have about 60 companies supporting schools now, and each of them are a little bit different. So we've tried to make a model that facilitates engagement by the company that also works for them. So yeah, it's just really listening, I guess, is the critical thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely makes for much, much better programs over time. So Mark, you know, I can imagine teachers around the world sitting back listening to this saying, oh my gosh, you know, I wish we had, you know, an entity like the STEAM Education Limited, you know, in our area that is, you know, so very deliberately working with schools and with industry partners and really providing this sort of linkage for us so that we can have access to this great content and be really comfortable in knowing that, you know, when we deliver the content, we're doing so with a high level of fidelity, because I think that's some of the fear, you know, as you alluded to right at the beginning, that, you know, not all teachers are necessarily going to be, you know, comfortable delivering science or high-end math content. We see this often, especially in primary grades. So for our listeners, Mark, share with us, do you have a favorite module or activity that you've been able to utilize and deliver through this partnership? And if so, I'm really curious as to why. And Elaine, that same question's coming to you as I'm watching everybody's gears turning here. So Mark, you're on the spot. Do you have a favorite?
Yeah, I would. I come from a scientific background. I did a degree myself in biology, so I have a love of biology, and I have had experience of both the biology modules that STEAM Education do and the engineering. So obviously, you probably think that I would side towards the biology, but I actually had an engineer in my class last year, Uni. He was absolutely brilliant. And there was a lesson on building a bridge out of pasta and blue tack. And I found that fascinating, the way the boys had to think. They worked together in groups and they had to think logically about how they were going to basically build a bridge that could take weight out of spaghetti pasta and blue tack. And I found that fascinating, the amount of discussion that it generated in the classroom. from boys who normally wouldn't engage in discussion in the classroom, but they obviously had an idea in their mind, and because of the environment of the lesson, they automatically, probably subconsciously, started contributing to a discussion which they would never do in another subject area. So I found that lesson absolutely fascinating. There was a couple of other lessons. Building a table out of paper was the same as well. So it was all completely about the children collaborating with each other, sharing their ideas. And then obviously there was the practical side of it where they had to go and build it. But that was my favorite lesson out of all of the lessons that have been done in my classroom. Very simple, but absolutely amazing to watch the kids work collaboratively together to build something out of very, very basic materials.
Yeah, I'm chuckling to myself because I love the fact that that was one of your favorites, because it's one that we use as well. We don't have blue tack. We use little baby marshmallows. We get those. They're easy. But you're absolutely right about the way people engage in it. And I love the fact that you highlighted this was so accessible that students who normally don't participate or participate in the same way suddenly rose to the occasion. And part of that is because you gave them a different way to learn than was the norm, right? And so suddenly you bumped up against a comfort level, I suspect, to some extent. There's a whole host of different sorts of things going on there, but the fact that you got all this collaborative, engagement is just really wonderful. So thank you for that. So Elaine, I warned you, same question tossed to you, in terms of what has been one of your favorites and why.
I think there is two. I think I have to say the module that was around prosthetics and medical devices. That's the company I work for. I have to say, because it actually brought some of what I do to life for me, and it was very, very educational. It was very, very practical, and we were making a prosthetic hand, and out of tubes and string, and it was just so much fun. And again, the groups and the kids can interact in a different way. I was lucky enough to be with a mixed school, so it was both boys and girls. Now there was some very competitive young males that really wanted to be so good at the building the prosthetic arm, and that was one that really sticks in my head. The other activity that really sticks in my head, and this is for a slightly different reason, is around materials and protecting an egg. Had an egg, and we had to build a way to throw it and to protect it. And it actually gave a group that didn't interact with some of them, in maybe the more the more abstract concepts of science. It actually, the creativity, and I'll bring back to that word that you used and that Alice used at the start, it brought a creativity with the group of girls that, and they were like, you could nearly see the light bulb go off and go like, this is what science is. I get to throw it, I get to protect an egg and throw it around the place. And and all. Now, it did take a lot of convincing that a parachute wasn't the way to work it, but, and I did my best with my memory of terminal velocity, and it was just going nowhere. Just we need absorption, like the absorption in the cars, and like shock absorbers, and it was just so fun. And there was a lot of happiness out of the room, and I think I might have disturbed a couple of other classes, but that's in no way for anyone to ever think that you shouldn't do science. But it was definitely a very favorite class of mine, and it was really nice to see different people and different students engage with different activities, because it really is a program that can engage everybody from all of the aspects, and to really just give that spark of STEM and STEAM activities to children that may not have seen it before. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That is so wonderful. Again, those are great Great examples. And I would also like to point out, science should be loud. It should be boisterous. It should be fun. It should be, everybody all in all the time, 100 miles, just go. So that's wonderful. Thank you for that. So Alice, I want to close our conversation by asking you the same question. What's your favorite over these last few years? But more importantly, what's next? What's coming? What's the fun sort of next iteration in this journey? Because having been an organizational founder, I happen to know for a fact it is truly a journey.
Oh yeah. Well, so this year probably changed the journey a little bit, accelerated some directions and cut others a little bit short. But do I have a favorite? I love all of them, and every time I go back to check, I think, oh, I'd love to do that one again. I'd love to teach that one myself. I did a short program on health sciences for children with the Pediatric Development Fund, so like attached to the new Children's Hospital, the Community Benefit Fund for those. And with that one, I worked with health professionals from all different fields in the classroom, and I loved that. We have a maths program, Maths in a Box, which I'd say has gotten a little less traction. It's a little harder to push, the maths one, but the content in the maths one, I really love it. Probably because it's a little bit more abstract even than the science or engineering, and people are so much less familiar with how maths relates to the world in real life. It's quite easy to pick out examples for science and engineering, but kind of abstract maths is absolutely beautiful and fascinating, and don't really get the chance to see that. So I'd love to get that one up and moving a bit more. Where next? Well, because of COVID, really, this year we developed teacher-led versions. So smaller boxes, shorter programs, even more simplified content, put together in a way that teachers can do it themselves until we can get back to the place, which is the favorite of everyone, the real human in the classroom. But in the absence of being able to do that, we've have a lot of teacher-led boxes heading out next week. Actually, I think Mark is going to do one in a few weeks' time when the schools reopen.
Yep.
And then the other direction that I'd like to go in personally is the development of teacher training, providing teacher training opportunities for primary school teachers, because like we meet so many of them that are so keen to do better, to learn more, to find out the best way to engage with their children. So that's one. And then I think the thing that probably needs to be addressed more, and I'd like to do this on a collaborative level, I guess, again, with industry and academia, is I think that the whole structure of the primary education system could do with being looked at and reworked. Shake it up a small bit.
For folks just listening and not watching, Mark is doing a joyful sign.
Yeah, so and I think there is a great willingness actually within all the partners in Ireland for that to happen. So finding a way to make that happen really is my next kind of personal buzz. So,
I love that. Give me a call, Alice, if you want to go down that road, because that's a very similar conversation that we're having, in the States. But I've been hearing it from, a lot of folks that I've been interviewing around the world, this discussion about it's time for a system overhaul. Not that the system was bad. It's just that it was designed at a point in time where our needs were very different and our kids were very different and the world was a different place. So sometimes it's not enough just to tweak, as we all on this conversation, we all know that, but sometimes helping the public understand that just because that's the way I learned when I was a kid does not mean that's the way we should be doing it now. And I have no doubt that's a conversation that you've all sort of bumped up against in your professional work.
I guess if I could add there, I think there are a lot of things that were and still are really good and really positive in the primary education system. And I think in a way, we're going a little bit away from that towards too much. And this is not in any way anti-technology or anti-online learning and like that, but we're human social learners. And I a lot of the basics, I think if we did them more and better, we would get further.
Mm-hmm.
And things like just the persistence of the course. So like you said, we're not doing kind of once-off science visits.
Right.
It's a
Right.
persistent program that builds a relationship between all of the people involved. And you can't build that relationship in one day or in
Mm-hmm.
kind of show and tell or magic show type of science demonstrations, which are all great. But
Mm-hmm.
educational value that we provide, I think, is bringing all the elements together, including persistent, repetitive interactions with diverse, positive role models that respects the skills from all sides.
Yeah.
And it's the combination of that, I think, is what needs to be worked on.
I would wholeheartedly agree. Absolutely. And on that note, I want to thank you all so much for taking time out of your day to share your story and your journey with us and with our listeners. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you very much for having us. It's been
Welcome.
a pleasure.
Thank you.